Thank you. Thank you. Friends and fellow citizens, it was 41 years ago that I first spoke in this chamber. At that time, my father was rather surprised to see me make it to the governorship at such a young age. Now I'm kind of surprised that I'm still here, and three more years to go. That is, unless I take my surplus campaign funds and put a ballot initiative on the November ballot to allow fourth-term governors to seek a final fifth term. All right. That's a light note. Back then, California was amazingly dynamic, and it still is. We who live here love and know this land as a unique place, which draws people from every part of the world because of the tolerance, the creativity, and the sheer openness. There's much to be thankful for. And yet, we live today in a world that's profoundly uncertain. What happens far away can touch us very directly. A slowdown in China, or turmoil in Iraq or Syria, or virtually anywhere, can send the stock market reeling and put California jobs and state revenues in jeopardy. And the battles far away sometimes comes right here to our soil, as the unprovoked and brutal attack in San Bernardino so clearly showed us. What occurs daily in so many parts of the world could occur here. That's why we have to be prepared and vigilant. I wish it weren't the case, but it is. Here at the state capitol, we often think we have more control over things than we actually do. But the truth is that global events, markets, and policies set the pace and shape the world we live in. The challenge is to solve today's problems without making those of tomorrow even worse. We face a future that is partly determined and yet in many ways unknown. Our job is to clearly face the facts we do know and prepare for the many unknowns as best we can. In that spirit, you're not going to hear me talk about new programs today. Rather, I'm going to focus on how we pay for the commitments we already have. The budget. Let's start with the budget. What we do know is that since the Second World War, we've experienced 10 recessions, none of them expected or accurately predicted. Economists are unable to pinpoint when a recession will begin or how long it'll last. Historically, California's budgets have been built around forecasts that assume uninterrupted growth. Just looking at the last two recessions, we noticed that ongoing state spending actually accelerated right into the downturn. That's why if you add up the deficits and surpluses between the year 2000 and 2016, you find that total deficits were 7 times as large as the surpluses, resulting in painful and unplanned for cuts. Schools, childcare, courts, social services, and other vital state programs were deeply affected. So too were our universities, which had to reduce classes and double tuition. I don't want to make those mistakes again. According to the economists at the Department of Finance, the next recession, even if it were only of average intensity, would cut our revenues by $55 billion over 3 years. That's why it's imperative to build up the rainy day fund, which was just recently approved by the voters, and invest our temporary surpluses in badly needed infrastructure or in other ways that will not lock in future spending. We must also be realistic about our current tax system. California has a very progressive but volatile income tax that provides 70% of general fund revenues. If we're to minimize the zigzag of spend, cut, spend that this tax system inevitably produces, we must build a very large reserve. We also know that inequality has risen sharply in recent decades. We've seen the disappearance of many middle-class jobs and the growing share of income taken by the top 1%, and even more so by the top 0.1%. In fact, the proportion of income earned by the 1% almost tripled. This contrasts sharply with a virtual stagnation in the wages of so many ordinary Americans. And CEO pay has risen from 22 times the average worker pay to 350 times. Such inequality is reinforced by national regulatory and tax policies and driven by globalization and the relentless influx of cheaper goods and outsourcing of higher-paying jobs. Technological change also plays its part through sophisticated software, robotics, and global communication. Of course, this creates jobs, keeps inflation low, and makes available phenomenal amounts of information and undreamed-of conveniences. But it also makes for higher pay at the top and a huge number of low-paying service jobs below. In the face of this growing inequality, California has not been passive. We've enacted or expanded many programs to counteract these powerful trends. We raised the minimum wage. We now have the first income tax credit. We strengthened our already strong prevailing wage laws. We made sure that 6.5 million workers will be paid for sick leave. And with respect to helping low-income students, we provide over $2 billion in Cal Grants, and we pay the enrollment fees for 65% of community college students. We've added back hundreds of millions of dollars to our CalWORKs, foster care, and child care programs. And in May, we'll start providing full health care coverage to the children of undocumented workers. Most importantly, and this is truly monumental, we've wholeheartedly embraced the Affordable Care Act. As a result, we're now enrolling 13.5 million Californians in Medi-Cal and another 1.5 million in Covered California. This is an historic achievement. It will provide health security to so many who would not otherwise afford it. Another area where we are leading the nation is how we provide health services to people in their own homes, and in the process, give jobs to their providers. Over the past 2 years, we've expanded this in-home supportive services program by serving more recipients, giving current recipients more hours of care, and by giving, for the first time, overtime pay to those workers who provide the services. While the benefits of these programs are enormous, so too are the costs, both now and into the future. In 4 years, total Medi-Cal costs have grown by $23 billion. As the state begins to pay for its share of the millions of new enrollees, the cost to the general fund will also rise. In 2012, the general fund paid $15 billion for Medi-Cal, but by 2019, that number is expected to be $25 billion, an increase of 2/3. For in-home supportive services, in just 2 years, total spending will jump by $2 billion to $9.2 billion, a 28% increase. As the economy reaches its endpoint and turns downward, it's crucial that we honestly face and plan for these increased costs. In this regard, I ask you, Republicans and Democrats alike, to seriously consider the newly revised MCO financing reform. Other states have taken advantage of this federal program, and California shouldn't shortchange itself. This is not a tax increase, no matter what anyone tells you. The arithmetic is simple. California comes out a clear winner. Please give it your consideration. Do I detect a few Republicans shaking hands there? I hope so. Anyway, applauding. With respect to education, the strong economic recovery and the passage of Proposition 30 has allowed us to increase spending on public schools and community college from a low point of $47.3 billion in 2011 to $71.6 billion this budget year. That's a 51% increase in overall spending, with significant sums allocated under the local control formula to provide for the unique challenges that face low-income students, English learners, and those in foster care. This pattern of educational spending reverses the historic practice of assuming that all students encounter similar circumstances. They do not. The local control formula, now in its fourth year, recognizes this fact with extra funding to enable educators to overcome the barriers that confront non-English speaking families and those with low and very modest incomes. I'm proud of how California has led the country and the way it is returning control to local school districts. For the last two decades, there's been a national movement to micromanage teachers from afar through increasingly minute and prescriptive state and federal regulations. California successfully fought that movement and has now changed its overly intrusive, test-heavy state control to a true system of local accountability. We also know that the state has made other commitments, ones that we have yet to fully pay for. Our retirement liabilities for pensions and lifelong health benefits for state and university workers total $220 billion. That's assuming a favorable return of 7.5% forever. Each year, the budget must allocate billions to slowly chip away at these obligations. Since 2012, we've taken steps to reduce the future costs of these pensions and put the teacher system back on a solid fiscal footing. Still, we have more to do. To date, we have set aside only a token amount to pay for $72 billion of future retiree health benefits. These liabilities are so massive that it's tempting to ignore them. We can't possibly pay them off in a year or two or even in 10. And there's little satisfaction in the notion of chipping away at an obligation for 3 decades to pay for something that has already been promised. Yet, it's our moral obligation to do so, particularly before we make new commitments. We have promised our workers these benefits in exchange for careers spent serving the public. If we fail to acknowledge and pay these obligations, we'll unfairly burden future generations of Californians with these debts. Another long-term obligation we have to face is our deteriorating infrastructure. From state office buildings here in Sacramento to levees and facilities in our parks, universities, prisons, and state hospitals, serious deficiencies abound. In this year's budget, I'm proposing that we use $2 billion of our temporary surplus on one-time investments to repair and replace aging structures. Neglecting what we have built over many years and letting it further deteriorate makes no sense and will just pile up costs in the long run. But that's not all. Our overall state deferred maintenance is staggering, estimated to total $77 billion. Most of that is in our roads, highways, and bridges. Here's our challenge. We have no choice but to maintain our transportation infrastructure. Yet doing so without an expanded and permanent revenue source is impossible. That means at some point, sooner rather than later, we have to bite the bullet and enact new fees and taxes for this purpose. Ideology and politics stand in the way, but one way or another, the roads must be fixed. Now, one of the bright sides in our contentious politics is the joining together of both parties and the people themselves to secure passage of Proposition 1, the water bond. That, together with our California Water Action Plan, establishes a solid program to deal with the drought and the longer-term challenge of using our water wisely. Our goal must be to preserve California's natural beauty and ensure a vibrant economy on our farms, in our cities, and for all the people who live here. There's no magic bullet, but a series of actions must be taken. We have to recharge our aquifers, manage the groundwater, recycle, capture stormwater, build storage and reliable conveyance, improve efficiency everywhere, invest in new technologies, including desalination, and all the while recognize that there are some limits. Achieving balance between all the conflicting interests is not easy, but I pledge to you that I'll listen and work patiently to achieve results that stand the test of time. Water goes to the heart of what California is and what it has been over centuries. Pitting fish against farmer misses the point and grossly distorts reality. Every one of us and every creature that dwells here form a complex system which must be understood and respected. I would even say reverenced. Besides the immediacy of drought, there's the overarching threat of a warming climate. Incredibly, though last year was the hottest on record, there are still those, particularly in Washington, who are in denial. But even the deniers can't deny that carbon pollution that exists all over the world is causing serious injury and respiratory diseases to people of all ages, but especially the young and the very old. Thankfully, the rest of the world has heard the message. Humankind must change the ways and radically decarbonize the economy. The Paris Climate Agreement was a breakthrough, and California was there, leading the way. Over 100 states, provinces, and regions have now signed on to our Under 2 MOU. The goal is to bring per capita greenhouse gases down to 2 tons per person. That will take decades and vast innovation. But with Senate Bill 350, we're on our way. Finally, we know that in life, disasters happen. Fires, floods, earthquakes, they will occur, and we must prepare to respond. That too, by the way, requires that we save and maintain a solid reserve. This morning, I've talked a lot about the difficulties that lie ahead. But let's not forget how far we've come. In 2011, the state deficit was $27 billion. Our credit rating was the worst in the nation, and unemployment was 12%. Now, the budget is in surplus. Standard & Poor's has raised our credit rating 3 times. We've paid down accumulated debt, $26 billion worth. We've created, you should applaud it because there might not be too much coming after this. We created a solid rainy day fund to offset the next economic downturn. We've increased funding for schools 51%. We're covering under Medi-Cal 13.5 million people, a 74% increase. We enacted for the first time an earned income tax credit. We raised our minimum wage to $10 an hour, and that's 80% higher than the federal minimum. $2 million new jobs have been created, and unemployment has dropped in half. Of course, the global recovery has a lot to do with that, so we should applaud what we can't control, too, because it helps. Yes, it's clear that California is still the great exception. We dare to do what others only dream of. Difficulties remain, and they always will. That is the human condition. And finding the right path forward is formidable. But find it we will, as we have in the past, and as we will again, with courage and confidence. Thank you. Not too long, I hope. I don't know.
Governor, thank you for addressing us in the chamber today. Everyone, let's give Governor Brown a round of applause as he exits the chamber. Without objection, the Governor's State of the State Address shall be printed in the Journal as a separate appendix. We will adjourn the joint convention sine die. We're back in regular session. Tomorrow, Friday, January 22nd, is the last day for any committee to hear and report to the floor bills introduced in their House. It is also the last day to submit requests to the Legislative Council. The session schedule is as follows. Monday, January 25th, floor session at 12 noon. Today, members, appropriations meeting 30 minutes after adjournment in room 4202. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Holden moves, Ms. Waldron seconds, that the House stands adjourned until Monday 25th at 12 p.m. Quorum call is lifted.